My daughter has been dead for 3 years, but yesterday, I found her wedding ring in my son-in-law's new girlfriend's jewelry box, and when I confronted him about it, he smiled and said, "You should have kept your mouth shut, Eleanor." How does a mother's heart keep beating when she realizes the man she trusted with her daughter's memory might have been the reason that memory exists at all? But before we go further, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt that gut-wrenching doubt about someone you were supposed to trust, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this darkness. My name is Eleanor Mae Hartfield, and for 3 years I've been living in a fog of grief so thick I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. My daughter, Jasmine, was only 29 years old when she died in what everyone called a tragic accident. She fell down the stairs in her own home, broke her neck, and left behind a husband, Marcus, and a 5-year-old son, my grandson Devon. The police investigation was brief, almost insultingly so. Accidental death, they said. She'd been drinking wine that evening. The stairs were steep and hardwood. She was wearing socks. It all made terrible, logical sense. Except it didn't. Not to me. Not to a mother who knew her daughter's every habit, every fear, every careful step. Jasmine hated those stairs from the day they moved into that house. She made Marcus install a railing on both sides, not just one. She never wore socks on them, always slippers with rubber grips. And my daughter, my careful, anxious Jasmine, rarely drank more than a single glass of wine because alcohol made her dizzy, and she hated losing control. But I said nothing. What could I say? The medical examiner found 0.08% blood alcohol in her system, just over the legal limit for driving. The physics made sense. My grief was too raw, too overwhelming to form coherent questions. And Marcus, poor Marcus, seemed devastated. He wept at the funeral, with his face buried in his hands. He held Devon close and whispered to him that Mommy was an angel now. He kept Jasmine's things exactly as she'd left them for months. Her clothes in the closet, her makeup on the bathroom counter, her books on the nightstand with bookmarks still holding her place in stories she would never finish. I visited them every Sunday without fail, bringing Devon's favorite chocolate chip cookies and sitting with him while Marcus claimed he needed to run errands or catch up on work. I'd read to Devon, play with his action figures, listen to his 5-year-old theories about where Mommy went and whether she could see him from heaven. Those visits were the only thing keeping me tethered to life, the only moments when the crushing weight of loss lifted enough for me to breathe. Marcus always seemed grateful for my help, hugging me tight when I arrived and thanking me profusely when I left. He called me Mom, the way he had since he married Jasmine 7 years ago. He asked my advice on everything from Devon's school to what to do with Jasmine's jewelry. He seemed lost, broken, drowning in the same grief that was suffocating me. Then, about 6 months ago, things started to change. Marcus began dating again, which I understood even if it hurt. He was young, only 32, and Devon needed a mother figure. The woman's name was Simone, and she was everything Jasmine wasn't. Loud, flashy, with platinum blonde hair and nails so long I couldn't imagine how she functioned. She moved into the house within 2 months, and suddenly my Sunday visits became awkward. Simone would hover in the doorway while I read to Devon, making comments about how I was spoiling him or teaching him outdated things. She'd interrupt our time together to announce it was Devon's bath time or nap time, even when it clearly wasn't. Marcus started making excuses about why I couldn't visit, saying Devon was busy with activities or they had family plans. The final straw came 2 months ago when Marcus told me he thought it would be better if I reduced my visits to once a month. For Devon's sake, he said. The boy needed to bond with Simone, to accept her as his new mother figure, and my constant presence was confusing him. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, but what could I do? Devon wasn't my child. Marcus had full custody. I had no legal rights, only a grandmother's desperate love for the last piece of my daughter I had left. So I agreed, even though it killed me. Even though I cried myself to sleep that night, clutching one of Jasmine's old sweaters that still faintly smelled like her perfume. But something was gnawing at me, a splinter of doubt that had been working its way deeper into my mind for months, little things that didn't quite fit together. The way Marcus had been so quick to pack up Jasmine's things once Simone moved in, boxing them and storing them in the garage as if my daughter had never existed. The way he'd changed the locks on the house and forgotten to give me a new key, something that had never been an issue before. The way Simone wore clothes that looked expensive, designer labels and real leather, even though Marcus worked as a mid-level accountant and had been complaining about money since Jasmine's death. And then there was the life insurance payout, $250,000 that Jasmine had taken out just 6 months before she died, increasing her coverage from the basic $50,000 policy she'd had since college. I'd never questioned it before. Young couples take out life insurance all the time, especially after they have children. It's responsible, prudent, but the timing nagged at me, especially combined with everything else. So 3 weeks ago, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Marcus's house on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew he'd be at work and Simone would be out. She'd posted on social media about a nail appointment at 2 o'clock, showing off her latest set of elaborate designs. I still had the old key to the house, the one from before Marcus changed the locks, and on a desperate hunch, I tried it. To my shock, it still worked in the back door, the one leading into the laundry room that Marcus probably forgot about when he changed the front locks. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key, and my heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I'd never broken into anyone's home before, never violated someone's privacy like this, but I told myself I wasn't really breaking in. This had been my daughter's house. I had a right to be here, to look for answers to questions I hadn't even fully formed yet. The house felt wrong as I stepped inside, foreign and hostile. Everything Jasmine had chosen, the warm earth tones and family photos and cozy throws, had been replaced with Simone's aesthetic. Stark whites and blacks, modern art that looked like random paint splashes, furniture that prioritized style over comfort. I almost turned around and left right then, convinced I was crazy, that grief had finally pushed me into actual criminal behavior. But then I saw Devon's backpack by the door, and that kept me moving forward. I was doing this for him, I told myself. I was making sure he was safe, that the man raising him was who he appeared to be. I started in the living room, not sure what I was looking for. Everything seemed normal, if cold. The kitchen was spotless, almost sterile. Jasmine's recipe box that had sat on the counter was gone. I climbed the stairs, those cursed stairs, my hand gripping the railing that Jasmine had insisted upon, and I felt tears prick my eyes as I imagined her final moments. Had she been scared? Had she known she was falling? Had she called out for help that never came? The master bedroom was at the end of the hall, and I hesitated outside the door. This felt like the deepest violation, entering the most private space. But I pushed the door open anyway, and immediately I felt sick. This had been Jasmine and Marcus's sanctuary, and now every trace of my daughter was gone. The furniture was different. The bedding was different. Even the paint color had been changed from Jasmine's soft sage green to an aggressive charcoal gray. I almost left then, disgusted with myself and ready to accept that I was just a grief-stricken mother seeing conspiracy where there was only tragedy. But something made me open the closet door. Jasmine's side of the closet, which Marcus had promised to keep untouched for at least a year, was now full of Simone's clothes, designer dresses, expensive shoes, handbags that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. And on the top shelf, partially hidden behind a stack of sweater boxes, was a jewelry case I didn't recognize. I pulled it down, my hands trembling, and opened it. Inside was a collection of jewelry, some of it costume pieces, but some of it clearly valuable. And there, nestled among Simone's gaudy cocktail rings and chandelier earrings, was something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Jasmine's wedding ring. The delicate platinum band with 3 small diamonds that Marcus had saved for months to buy, that Jasmine had never taken off except to clean, that should have been buried with her because that's what she'd wanted. That's what she'd written in the letter she left with her will. I picked it up with shaking fingers, and yes, inside was the inscription, J.H. Paul Emma Forever, 2016. I stood there in that closet, holding my dead daughter's wedding ring in one hand and gripping the jewelry case in the other, and suddenly everything clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. The increased life insurance, the quick investigation, the wine in her system that Jasmine would never have drunk, the stares she was terrified of, Marcus's convincing grief that had seemed almost theatrical in hindsight, Simone appearing so quickly, moving in so fast, spending money that shouldn't exist, and now this ring, this sacred symbol of my daughter's marriage, being stored in another woman's jewelry box like a trophy. I heard a sound downstairs, the back door opening, and panic shot through me like electricity. I shoved the jewelry case back onto the shelf, but I couldn't make myself put the ring back. I slipped it into my pocket and rushed out of the bedroom, my mind racing. I could hear footsteps, someone moving around in the kitchen. I crept down the stairs as quietly as possible, pressed against the wall, praying I wouldn't be seen. When I reached the bottom, I could see into the kitchen. It was Marcus, home hours before he should have been, pouring himself a glass of water and talking on his phone. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was casual, almost happy. I managed to slip into the laundry room and out the back door without being detected, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I sat in my car 2 blocks away for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what I'd found and what it meant. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept turning the ring over in my fingers, feeling the weight of it, the proof of it. But proof of what exactly? That Marcus had kept Jasmine's ring instead of burying it with her? That was wrong, certainly, a betrayal of her wishes, but it wasn't illegal. That he'd given it to his new girlfriend? That was disgusting, but still not criminal. I had no proof of anything except that Marcus was a worse person than I'd thought, but I couldn't let it go. The next day, I called Marcus and asked if I could come by that evening to drop off a birthday gift for Devon. His birthday was still 2 weeks away, but Marcus didn't question it. When I arrived, Simone answered the door, her expression sour. "Eleanor," she said flatly, "Marcus didn't mention you were coming." "I just need a moment," I replied, forcing a smile. "I brought Devon's birthday present." She let me in reluctantly, and I found Marcus in the living room watching television with Devon curled up next to him. My grandson's face lit up when he saw me, and he jumped off the couch to hug me. That moment of pure love and trust from that little boy strengthened my resolve. I handed Devon the wrapped gift, a new book series he'd been wanting, and watched him tear into it with 5-year-old enthusiasm. Then I turned to Marcus and pulled the ring from my pocket. "I found this," I said simply, watching his face carefully. For just a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear? Anger? Then his expression smoothed into confusion. "Is that Jasmine's ring?" he asked. "How did you get that?" I think the better question is, how did it end up in Simone's jewelry box instead of buried with my daughter where it belongs? I kept my voice steady, but inside I was shaking. Marcus stood up slowly, his face hardening. He took Devon's hand and said, "Buddy, go play in your room for a bit. Grandma and I need to talk." Once Devon was gone, Marcus's entire demeanor changed. The mask of the grieving widower fell away, and what remained was something cold and calculating. "You broke into my house," he said quietly. "That's a crime, Eleanor." "And stealing from the dead isn't?" I shot back. "That ring was supposed to be buried with Jasmine. She wrote it in her will." "Wills aren't always followed to the letter," Marcus replied, stepping closer to me. "And that ring is worth about $8,000. Why would I bury that much money?" His casual admission, his complete lack of shame, stunned me into silence. "Besides," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "you should have kept your mouth shut, Eleanor." The way he said it, the cold threat underlying those words, sent chills down my spine. This wasn't the son-in-law I thought I knew. This was someone else entirely, someone capable of things I didn't want to imagine. "What did you do to my daughter?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Marcus smiled, and it was the most horrible smile I'd ever seen. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said, "and I think it's time we make your monthly visits every other month. Devon's doing fine. He doesn't need a paranoid grandmother filling his head with crazy ideas. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." "The truth?" Marcus laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "The truth is that accidents happen, Eleanor. Tragic, terrible accidents. And sometimes they happen to people who have substantial life insurance policies. And sometimes the people left behind are smart enough to move on and build new lives. That's the truth." I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the world spinning, as the full implication of his words crashed over me. "You killed her," I said, and it wasn't a question. "I never said that." Marcus's voice was perfectly calm. "But I will say this, you have no proof of anything except breaking and entering. And if you try to cause problems, if you go to the police with your little conspiracy theories, I'll make sure you never see Devon again. I'll get a restraining order. I'll move states if I have to. That boy is my son, and you have no legal rights to him whatsoever." He stepped even closer, his face inches from mine. So here's what you're going to do, Eleanor. You're going to go home. You're going to keep that ring as a memento of your daughter since you seem to want it so badly, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. You're going to be grateful for whatever access to Devon I choose to give you, and you're going to live with the knowledge that there's not a damn thing you can do about any of this. Do we understand each other? I drove home that night in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, Marcus's threats echoing in my head like a death sentence. He was right about everything, and that was the most terrifying part. I had no proof. I had broken into his house. I had no legal rights to Devon. And if I pushed too hard, if I made too much noise, I would lose the only piece of Jasmine I had left. I would lose my grandson, the little boy who still called me Grandma and hugged me like I was his whole world. Marcus knew exactly where to twist the knife to cause the most pain, and he'd done it with a smile on his face. That night, I sat at my kitchen table until 3 a.m, Jasmine's wedding ring on the table in front of me, asking myself what kind of mother I was, what kind of grandmother. Was I really going to let my daughter's killer walk free? Was I going to let him raise her son, poison that innocent child with his lies, spend the money he'd gotten from her death? But what choice did I have? I was 67 years old, living on a fixed income from my late husband's pension and Social Security. I had no power, no resources, no connections. Marcus was young, employed, articulate, and he had the law on his side. He was Devon's legal guardian. The police had closed Jasmine's case. The insurance company had paid out. Everything was neat and tidy and legal, and I was just a grieving mother who couldn't let go. Except, I couldn't let go. Not now, not knowing what I knew. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my sister, Patricia, who lived 2 states away in Virginia. Patricia was the opposite of me in almost every way. Bold where I was cautious, confrontational where I was accommodating, suspicious where I wanted to believe the best in people. She'd never liked Marcus, had told Jasmine on her wedding day that there was something off about him, something too smooth, too practiced. Jasmine had laughed it off as Aunt Patricia being Aunt Patricia, always seeing the worst in everyone. But maybe Patricia had been right all along. I told her everything. The ring, the insurance money, Marcus's threats, my suspicions about the accident. I expected her to tell me I was being paranoid, that grief was making me see monsters where there were none. Instead, she was silent for a long moment, and then she said, "I'm coming to stay with you. Give me 2 days to arrange things, and I'll be there. We're going to figure this out, Eleanor. We're going to get justice for Jasmine." The relief I felt at those words nearly broke me. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally, someone who believed me, someone who wouldn't let Marcus's threats intimidate us into silence. Patricia arrived on a Friday evening, pulling up in her old Buick with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. She hugged me tight on the doorstep and said, "Show me everything. Tell me everything again. Every detail you can remember." We sat up until midnight, going over every piece of information I had. Patricia took notes in a spiral notebook, her handwriting sharp and precise, asking questions that made me think harder about things I'd overlooked. When did Marcus increase the life insurance? 6 months before Jasmine died. Who suggested it? Marcus, saying they needed better coverage now that Devon was getting older and expenses were increasing. Had Jasmine mentioned any problems in the marriage? Not directly, but in the last few months before her death, she'd seemed stressed, distracted. I'd asked if everything was okay, and she'd said everything was fine, just work pressure and toddler chaos, the normal struggles of young parenthood. But Patricia zeroed in on something I'd almost forgotten. "You said Jasmine had been working on her will around the same time Marcus increased the insurance?" "Yes," I replied, trying to remember the details. She'd mentioned wanting to update it after Devon was born, but she'd been putting it off. Then suddenly, she was very focused on getting it done. She asked me to be Devon's guardian if anything happened to both her and Marcus. "And did she follow through with that?" Patricia asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "She said she was working with a lawyer, but then she died before we talked about it again. Marcus never mentioned it after the funeral. I assumed she hadn't finished the paperwork." Patricia wrote something in her notebook and underlined it twice. "We need to find out if she completed that will, because if she did, and if it names you as Devon's guardian, that changes everything." The thought hadn't even occurred to me, and suddenly hope flickered in my chest like a candle flame. "How do we find out?" "We start with her lawyer. Do you know who she was using?" I shook my head. "But I can try to find out. She might have mentioned the name to her friend Keisha. They were close, told each other everything. The next morning, Patricia and I drove to Keisha's apartment across town. Keisha had been Jasmine's best friend since college, her maid of honor at the wedding, Devon's godmother. She'd been devastated by Jasmine's death, and I'd seen her at the funeral, sobbing so hard she could barely stand. But in the 3 years since, our contact had dwindled to occasional text messages. I felt guilty about that now, realizing I'd been so consumed by my own grief that I'd neglected the other people who loved Jasmine. Keisha answered the door in sweatpants and a tank top, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Miss Eleanor," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "I need to talk to you about Jasmine," I said gently. "About something important. This is my sister Patricia." We sat in Keisha's small living room, and I explained everything. The ring, my suspicions, Marcus's threats. Keisha's face grew paler with every word. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her hands twisted together in her lap. "I've been carrying something for 3 years, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something Jasmine told me a few weeks before she died. I didn't know what to do with it, and after the accident, everyone said I was just looking for someone to blame because I couldn't accept that it was random and senseless." My heart started pounding. "What did she tell you?" Keisha took a shaky breath. "She said Marcus had been acting strange, distant. She'd found charges on their credit card for a hotel in the city, expensive restaurants, places they hadn't gone together. When she confronted him, he said it was business dinners, client meetings, but Jasmine didn't believe him. She thought he was having an affair. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture that made me feel sick." "Did she say anything else?" "She said she was going to confront him properly, that she'd hired a private investigator to follow him for a week. She was waiting for the report, and she said something that's haunted me ever since." Keisha's voice cracked. "She said, if something happens to me, make sure Devon is safe. Make sure he doesn't forget me. Don't let Marcus erase me." Patricia and I exchanged glances. "Did she seem scared when she said that?" Patricia asked. "Not scared exactly," Keisha replied. "More like determined, like she was preparing for something. I asked her what she meant and she laughed it off, said she was being dramatic. But now, knowing what you found, Miss Eleanor, I think she knew Marcus was dangerous. I think she was trying to protect Devon before it was too late." "Do you know the name of the lawyer she was working with?" I asked urgently. Keisha nodded. "Martin Chen. His office is downtown. Jasmine really liked him, said he was thorough and actually listened to her concerns instead of just pushing papers. We thanked Keisha and promised to stay in touch, to let her know what we discovered. As we drove to Martin Chen's office, I felt a strange mixture of hope and dread. If Jasmine had completed her will, if she'd documented her concerns about Marcus, if there was any official record of her suspicions, maybe we had a chance. Maybe I wasn't just a paranoid old woman after all. Martin Chen's office was in a modest building near the courthouse, and when we explained who we were, his assistant's expression shifted to sympathy. She led us back to his office, where a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair stood to greet us. "Mrs. Hartfield," he said, shaking my hand. "I remember Jasmine. I was so sorry to hear about her death. She was a lovely young woman." "Did she complete her will?" Patricia asked directly, never one for small talk. Martin hesitated, and I could see him weighing attorney-client privilege against compassion. "She did," he finally said. "She came in about 2 weeks before her death to sign the final documents." "And what did those documents say?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Specifically regarding guardianship of her son?" Martin sat down and gestured for us to do the same. "Mrs. Hartfield, normally I couldn't discuss this with you, but given the circumstances, and given that you're named in the will, I think you have a right to know. Jasmine designated you as Devon's guardian in the event that both she and Marcus were deceased, or if Marcus was deemed unfit to parent." The words hung in the air, and I felt tears streaming down my face. My daughter had wanted me to raise her son if anything happened. She'd put it in writing, made it legal. "But Marcus is alive," I said, "so that provision doesn't apply." "Not necessarily," Martin replied carefully. "The second provision, regarding unfitness to parent, could potentially be invoked, but you'd need substantial evidence to challenge his custody in court. It's not an easy process." "What about the rest of the will?" Patricia pressed. "Was there anything else unusual?" Martin pulled out a file and flipped through it. There was one thing that struck me as odd at the time. Jasmine had a separate letter that she asked me to hold, to be opened only in the event of her death, and only if there were any questions about the circumstances. She said it was probably paranoid, but she wanted to be safe. My heart stopped. You have a letter from Jasmine, written before she died? I do. It's sealed, and I haven't opened it per her instructions. But given your concerns, Mrs. Hartfield, I think now might be the time. He pulled out an envelope from the file, and I could see Jasmine's handwriting on the front. To be opened only if there are questions about my death. Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand as Martin carefully opened the envelope and began to read. His expression grew more serious with each line, and when he finished, he looked at us with something like shock in his eyes. Mrs. Hartfield, he said quietly, I think we need to call the police. Right now. The letter, as Martin explained it, was Jasmine's insurance policy. She documented everything. Her suspicions about Marcus's affair, the private investigator's findings that confirmed he'd been seeing a woman named Simone for 6 months, her confrontation with him where he'd become verbally aggressive and thrown a glass against the wall. She'd written about how Marcus had suddenly become very interested in their life insurance policies, suggesting they increase coverage right after she discovered the affair. And then, most damning of all, she'd written about a conversation where Marcus had casually mentioned how easy it would be for someone to have an accident in their house, how those steep stairs were a lawsuit waiting to happen, how they should probably get better insurance to cover any potential liability. At the time, Jasmine had thought he was just being paranoid about homeowners' insurance. But looking back, writing the letter, she realized he'd been planning something. She'd written, I don't think Marcus would actually hurt me. I don't want to believe that, but I'm writing this just in case I'm wrong. If something happens to me, if I die in what looks like an accident, please investigate Marcus. Please don't let him get away with it. Please protect my son. I couldn't breathe. My daughter had known. She'd seen the danger and tried to warn us, and we'd all missed it. The police had never looked at this letter because Martin hadn't known to bring it forward. The investigation had been so quick, so perfunctory, that no one had thought to ask if there were any relevant documents. And for 3 years, this letter had sat in a file in Martin's office, Jasmine's voice crying out from beyond the grave, unheard. Martin made the call immediately, speaking to a Detective Rodriguez, who agreed to come to the office right away. While we waited, Patricia held my hand, and I stared at Jasmine's letter. Her handwriting so familiar, her words so full of love and fear and desperate hope that someone would listen. Detective Rodriguez arrived within 30 minutes, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of competence. Martin handed over the letter, and she read it carefully, her expression growing more focused with each line. Why wasn't this brought forward during the initial investigation? She asked. I wasn't aware there was any question about the accident, Martin replied. The media reported it as straightforward, and no one from the police department contacted me. I didn't realize I should bring it forward. Detective Rodriguez turned to me. Mrs. Hartfield, what made you start questioning your son-in-law now, 3 years later? I told her everything, showing her the ring, explaining about Simone moving in so quickly, about Marcus's threats when I confronted him, about the life insurance payout and the timing of everything. She took notes, asked pointed questions, and I could see her mind working, piecing together the same puzzle Patricia and I had been assembling. This is enough to reopen the investigation, she said finally. But I need to be honest with you. 3 years is a long time. Physical evidence degrades. Memories fade. Witnesses move on. Even with this letter, proving murder rather than manslaughter or accident will be difficult. But you'll try? I asked, my voice breaking. You'll investigate? I'll try, she promised. Give me a few days to review the original case file and interview some people quietly. I don't want to tip off Mr. Foster that we're looking into this until we have a stronger case. In the meantime, I need you to act normal. Keep your regular schedule with your grandson. Don't confront Marcus again. Don't do anything that might make him suspicious. What if he hurts Devon? The question burst out of me, the fear I'd been suppressing for weeks. What if he realizes we're investigating and he does something to my grandson? Detective Rodriguez's expression softened. I understand your fear, Mrs. Hartfield, but right now, Devon is Marcus's son, and we have no evidence that the boy is in danger. If we move too quickly without sufficient evidence, we could lose our chance to build a case, and Marcus could disappear with Devon, and we might never find them. She was right, but the thought of leaving Devon in that house for even one more day made me feel like I was failing Jasmine all over again. Patricia must have sensed my thoughts because she put her arm around me and said, "We'll be smart about this, Eleanor. We'll do exactly what Detective Rodriguez says, and we'll trust that Jasmine's words will finally bring her justice. If you've ever had to pretend everything is normal while your world is crumbling apart, while you know a terrible secret that you can't share, leave me a comment. Tell me how you survived it, because the next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life." I went about my routine, visiting Devon on my scheduled days, smiling at Marcus, being polite to Simone, all while knowing what I knew. Every time Marcus hugged me goodbye, I wanted to scratch his eyes out. Every time I saw him touch Devon, I wanted to grab my grandson and run. But I played my part, the grateful grandmother who knew her place, who'd accepted Marcus's warnings and backed down. And all the while, Detective Rodriguez was working behind the scenes, interviewing people, reviewing evidence, building a case that might finally give my daughter justice. Patricia stayed with me through all of it, keeping me sane, stopping me from doing something rash that would destroy our chances. We started documenting everything, every interaction with Marcus, every visit with Devon, every expense we could find information about online. Patricia even did something slightly illegal, creating a fake social media profile to friend some of Marcus's co-workers and Simone's friends, gathering information about their lifestyle, their spending, their timeline. What we found made everything worse. Simone and Marcus had been posting couple photos on social media that dated back 4 years, a full year before Jasmine died. They'd just been careful to keep their accounts private and their relationship hidden from anyone who knew Jasmine. There were photos of them at hotels, at restaurants, at vacation spots, all carefully cropped to avoid anything that might identify the location or date. But the metadata on some of the photos, which Patricia managed to extract using some computer program I didn't understand, showed dates that overlapped with times when Marcus had told Jasmine he was at business conferences. He hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been living a double life, maintaining a whole separate relationship while married to my daughter. And based on the timeline, Simone had to have known about Jasmine. She'd been the other woman, willingly participating in Marcus's deception, possibly even helping him plan what came next. Then, 2 weeks after my meeting with Detective Rodriguez, I got a call that made my blood run cold. It was Keisha, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Miss Eleanor," she sobbed, "someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything valuable, just tore the place apart. And there was a note on my kitchen counter. It said, 'Stop asking questions about things that don't concern you, or next time, you won't just lose your belongings.'" My hands started shaking. "Did you call the police?" "Yes, they're here now, taking a report. But Miss Eleanor, I'm scared." "How did they know I've been asking questions? I only talked to a few of Jasmine's old co-workers, trying to see if any of them knew about Marcus's affair. How did anyone know?" There was only one answer. Marcus knew we were investigating. Somehow he'd found out, and now he was trying to intimidate us into stopping. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately, telling her about Keisha's break-in. She listened carefully, and then said something that chilled me to the bone. "Mrs. Hartfield, I need you to be very careful. If Marcus knows we're investigating, he might escalate. He's already proven he's willing to kill to protect his secrets. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't let him know you're aware of the danger. And whatever you do, don't confront him." But fate, or maybe God, had other plans. Because the very next day, I got a call from Devon's school. My grandson was in the hospital. He'd fallen down the stairs at home. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. Patricia was behind the wheel, breaking every speed limit, while I sat in the passenger seat with my phone clutched in my hand, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening anymore. The school nurse had said Devon was conscious, that he'd been brought in by ambulance, that Marcus was already there. She'd said the words, "fell down the stairs," and I'd felt my entire world tilt sideways, reality bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. History was repeating itself. Marcus was trying to kill my grandson the same way he'd killed my daughter. When we burst through the emergency room doors, I saw Marcus in the waiting area, and the performance he was giving was Oscar-worthy. He was pacing, running his hands through his hair, his face the picture of paternal distress. When he saw me, he rushed over, and I had to physically restrain myself from attacking him. "Eleanor, thank God you're here," he said, his voice shaking convincingly. "It's Devon. He fell down the stairs this morning. I just stepped out to get the mail, and I heard this crash, and when I ran inside, he was at the bottom, unconscious. I called 911 immediately." "Where's Simone?" Patricia asked sharply, her eyes boring into him. Something flickered across Marcus's face, gone so fast I almost missed it. "She's out of town, visiting her sister in Florida. She's trying to get a flight back now." "How convenient," Patricia muttered, but I elbowed her to be quiet. We couldn't tip our hand. Not yet. Not when Devon might still be in danger. A doctor came out then, a young woman with kind eyes and exhaustion written across her face. "Mr. Foster, your son is awake and asking for you. He has a concussion and a fractured wrist, but he's going to be fine." He was very lucky. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I nearly collapsed, but Patricia caught my elbow and held me steady. "Can we see him?" I asked. The doctor looked at Marcus, who nodded. "Of course. Eleanor is his grandmother. She should be there." We followed the doctor back to a small room where Devon lay in a hospital bed, his little arm in a cast, his face pale and scared. When he saw me, tears spilled down his cheeks. "Grandma," he whispered, reaching for me with his good hand. I rushed to his side, taking his small hand in mine, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "I'm here, baby. Grandma's here. You're going to be okay." "I fell," Devon said, his voice small and confused. "I was going downstairs to get breakfast and I just fell." "What happened exactly?" the doctor asked gently. "Do you remember?" Devon's face scrunched up in concentration. "I was going down, and then I felt someone push me, but when I looked, nobody was there. And then I was falling, and it hurt really bad." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "Kids have such active imaginations. There was nobody there, buddy. You just lost your balance." "But I felt it," Devon insisted, looking at his father with confusion. "I felt hands on my back." The doctor made a note on her chart, and I saw her exchange a glance with the nurse standing by the door. They'd heard what Devon said. They'd documented it, and I knew with absolute certainty that Marcus had pushed him. He tried to kill my grandson, probably for the insurance money, probably because Devon was becoming a liability, a witness who might remember something or say something that would expose the truth about Jasmine's death. The monster standing beside me had murdered my daughter, and now he'd tried to murder her son, and he was going to keep getting away with it unless I did something. "I need to speak with you outside," I said to Marcus, my voice deadly calm. He followed me into the hallway, and Patricia came too, positioning herself between me and any escape route. "You pushed him," I said quietly. "You tried to kill your own son." Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. Then he smiled that horrible smile. "You can't prove that. A 5-year-old's imagination isn't evidence. He fell. Accidents happen in houses with steep stairs. You of all people should know that, Eleanor." "The police are investigating Jasmine's death," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "They found her letter. They know everything." I saw fear flash across his face, real and raw, before he controlled it. "What letter?" But his voice was too careful, too measured. "The one she wrote before you killed her. The one where she documented your affair with Simone, your suspicious interest in life insurance, your threatening behavior. It's all there, Marcus. Your whole plan, exposed in her own handwriting." Marcus's jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me right there in the hospital hallway. Then he took a breath and stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Even if such a letter existed, it proves nothing. People write paranoid things when they're upset about affairs. It doesn't mean I killed her. And good luck explaining to a judge why you waited 3 years to suddenly develop these concerns. They'll think you're a bitter old woman who can't accept that her daughter died in a stupid accident. We'll see what the judge thinks when they hear about the private investigator's report, the timeline of your affair, the insurance money, and now this, you pushing your own son down the stairs." Patricia's voice was ice cold. "We'll see how that plays in court." "You have nothing," Marcus hissed. "And if you try to take Devon from me, I'll bury you in legal fees and character assassination. I'll tell everyone you're senile, that you're harassing me out of grief-fueled delusion. I'll make sure you never see him again. Is that what you want, Eleanor? To lose your grandson completely while you chase after shadows and conspiracy theories?" Before I could respond, Detective Rodriguez appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She walked toward us with purpose, her eyes locked on Marcus. "Marcus Foster?" she said formally. "I'm Detective Rodriguez with the Atlanta Police Department. I need you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding the death of Jasmine Foster and the incident involving your son this morning." Marcus's face went white. "I don't have to answer anything without a lawyer present." "That's absolutely your right," Rodriguez agreed calmly. "But we have some new evidence that's come to light, and I think you'll want to hear what we found. Unless you'd prefer we discuss it here in the hospital hallway, where everyone can hear." I watched Marcus's mind work, calculating his options, weighing his chances. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "Fine, I'll come to the station, but I'm calling my lawyer right now." "Of course," Rodriguez said pleasantly. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Hartfield, I need to speak with you as well, and I need to interview Devon, with your permission, about what happened this morning." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What evidence did you find?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Let's talk somewhere more private." We ended up in a small consultation room, Patricia and me on one side of a table, Rodriguez on the other. She pulled out a folder and opened it, showing us photographs and documents I didn't immediately understand. The original autopsy report on your daughter noted the fall and the broken neck, but it also noted some bruising on her upper arms that was attributed to the impact, Rodriguez began. "I had a forensic pathologist review the photos and measurements. He believes those bruises are consistent with being grabbed forcefully, not with impact injuries. Someone held your daughter's arms tightly before she fell." She pulled out another document. "We also reviewed the original crime scene photos more carefully. There was a wine glass on the kitchen counter with Jasmine's fingerprints and lip prints, and the contents tested positive for wine with a blood alcohol concentration that would have put her over the legal limit. But here's the interesting thing. Jasmine's medical records show she had a severe allergy to sulfites, which are common in wine. She would have known better than to drink red wine, which has high sulfite content. Her friend Keisha confirmed she only drank white wine from specific brands that were sulfite-free." My breath caught in my throat. "He drugged her. The wine was drugged. That's our theory," Rodriguez confirmed. "We're trying to get the wine glass from evidence storage to test for other substances, but it's been 3 years. There's a chance it's been destroyed or contaminated. However, we did find something else. When we started pulling Marcus's financial records as part of our investigation, we found some interesting charges from 3 years ago, right before Jasmine died. Specifically, he purchased a substance called GHB from an online source using a prepaid credit card he thought was untraceable." Patricia leaned forward. "GHB? What's that?" "It's a date rape drug," Rodriguez explained. "Colorless, odorless, can be slipped into drinks. It causes dizziness, confusion, loss of motor control, and in high enough doses, unconsciousness. If Marcus drugged Jasmine's wine with GHB, she would have been impaired when she approached those stairs. She might not have even remembered what happened, which is probably why she didn't call out or try to catch herself. She was incapacitated. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. He hadn't just pushed her down the stairs. He'd drugged her first, made sure she couldn't fight back, couldn't save herself. He'd planned every detail, made it look like an accident, and then he'd grieved publicly while collecting the insurance money and moving his mistress into my daughter's home. "Can you prove he bought the GHB?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We have the electronic trail," Rodriguez said. "It's going to take time to build the case, and he's going to fight it. But yes, I believe we can prove it. And with Jasmine's letter, with Devon's statement about being pushed, with the financial evidence and the timeline of the affair, we have enough to charge him." "Charge him with what exactly?" Patricia asked. "First-degree murder of Jasmine Foster, attempted murder of Devon Foster, insurance fraud, and a few other charges we're still working on. If convicted, he's looking at life in prison without possibility of parole." I closed my eyes, feeling tears stream down my face. After 3 years, after so much pain and doubt and helplessness, justice was finally coming for Marcus. Jasmine's voice, preserved in that letter, was finally being heard. "What happens to Devon?" I asked, the most important question of all. "He can't go back to Marcus. Child Protective Services is already involved," Rodriguez assured me. "Given the circumstances and the contents of Jasmine's will, you'll be able to petition for emergency custody." It won't be automatic. There will be hearings and evaluations, but with Martin Chen's testimony about Jasmine's wishes and with Marcus facing criminal charges, I think you have a very strong case. The relief and joy and grief all crashed over me at once, and I sobbed into Patricia's shoulder while she held me tight. My daughter was still gone. That would never change. But her son was safe now. Her killer was going to face justice. And her wishes for Devon's future were going to be honored at last. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Marcus was arrested and charged, held without bail, given the flight risk and the severity of the charges. His lawyer tried every trick in the book, claiming the evidence was circumstantial, that Jasmine's letter was just the paranoid writings of a jealous wife, that Devon's statement about being pushed was a child's confused memory. But piece by piece, Detective Rodriguez and the prosecutor built an ironclad case, the financial records showing the GHB purchase, the timeline of the affair with Simone, who eventually turned on Marcus to save herself, testifying that he'd talked about wanting to be free of Jasmine but couldn't afford a divorce, the forensic evidence about the bruising on Jasmine's arms, the expert testimony about how the supposed accident scene had been staged, and most damning of all, Jasmine's letter, read aloud in court in a voice that felt like it was coming from beyond the grave, my daughter speaking the truth she'd known but hadn't been able to prove. When the guilty verdict came back on all counts, I was sitting in the courtroom with Devon on one side and Patricia on the other. Devon was living with me now, adjusting to his new life with a grandmother who loved him more than anything in the world. He'd started therapy to process everything that had happened, and slowly, day by day, the scared, confused little boy was becoming happy again. He talked about Jasmine now without prompting, sharing memories of his mother that I cherished like precious gems. Marcus's sentencing was set for 3 weeks after the conviction, and I knew I needed to be there. I needed to look him in the eye when the judge told him he would spend the rest of his life in prison. I needed him to know that he hadn't won, that Jasmine had beaten him in the end, that love and truth and justice had prevailed over his evil. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Keisha was there, and several of Jasmine's other friends. Patricia sat beside me, holding my hand, and Devon was with a babysitter at home because some things a child shouldn't have to witness. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement before sentencing, and I stood up. My legs were shaking, but Patricia's hand on my back steadied me. I walked to the front of the courtroom and stood at the podium, looking directly at Marcus for the first time since the trial began. He looked smaller now, diminished, the polish and charm stripped away to reveal the hollow man underneath. "Your Honor," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. 3 years ago, Marcus Foster murdered my daughter. He planned it carefully, drugged her, and pushed her down the stairs to make it look like an accident. He did this so he could collect insurance money and be free to marry his mistress. And then, not content with destroying one life, he tried to kill my grandson, Jasmine's 5-year-old son, in the exact same way. I took a breath, feeling the weight of every word. But what Marcus didn't count on was a mother's love. He didn't count on Jasmine being smart enough to document her suspicions, brave enough to name her fears, and hopeful enough to believe that someone would listen. He didn't count on me refusing to let go, refusing to accept that my daughter's death was just a random tragedy. And he didn't count on the fact that evil, no matter how carefully planned, eventually exposes itself. I looked directly at Marcus, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been regret or might have been just self-pity. "You took my daughter from me. You took Devon's mother. You tried to take my grandson. But you failed, Marcus. Jasmine's love was stronger than your hate. Her truth was more powerful than your lies. And now you'll spend the rest of your life behind bars, while Devon grows up knowing that his mother was a hero who saved him from beyond the grave." The judge sentenced Marcus to 2 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, plus additional time for the other charges. When the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, he didn't look back, and I felt, for the first time in 3 years, like I could breathe again. That night I sat in Devon's room while he slept, watching his chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. On the nightstand was a framed photo of Jasmine, smiling that beautiful smile that had lit up every room she entered. I touched the glass gently and whispered, "I got him, baby. I got justice for you, and I promise I'll take care of Devon. I'll love him enough for both of us. I'll tell him every day how brave and smart and wonderful his mama was. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've listened to this old woman's tale of loss and justice and a mother's undying love, I want to thank you. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in the power of truth, if you believe that evil doesn't always win, if you believe that love can reach across the divide between life and death. Comment below and tell me your own stories of fighting for justice, of refusing to give up when everyone told you to let go. We need to hear these stories. We need to know we're not alone. Devon is 7 now, thriving in school, playing soccer, making friends. He has nightmares sometimes, and in those dark moments he calls for his mama. I go to him and hold him close, and I tell him that Jasmine is always with us, watching over us, protecting us. And I believe that's true. I believe she guided me to that jewelry box, to Martin Chen's office, to Detective Rodriguez. I believe she made sure that Marcus's evil didn't triumph, that her son would grow up safe and loved. I still visit Jasmine's grave every Sunday, but now I bring Devon with me. We plant flowers, we read books aloud, we tell her about our week, and sometimes, when the wind rustles through the leaves of the oak tree that shades her resting place, I swear I can hear her voice whispering, "Thank you, Mama. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for saving my baby." 3 years ago, my daughter called out to me from beyond the grave through a letter she wrote in desperation and fear. And I heard her. That's what mothers do. We hear our children when they cry for help, whether they're standing in front of us or speaking to us from the other side of death. We fight for them. We never stop fighting for them. We keep fighting until justice is served and love prevails. Marcus Foster thought he could silence my daughter by killing her. He thought he could intimidate me into accepting his lies. He was wrong, because a mother's love is stronger than death, fiercer than evil, more enduring than time. Jasmine's love saved her son, and my love for both of them brought a killer to justice. That's the truth I want to leave you with today. Evil may seem powerful, but love is stronger. Lies may seem convincing, but truth prevails. And when someone you love is in danger, when injustice screams to be answered, never give up. Never stop fighting. Never let them silence you. Because somewhere, in the space between heartbeats, in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, the ones we've lost are still with us, still guiding us, still loving us, still fighting alongside us for justice and truth and the protection of those left behind. My daughter died 3 years ago, but her voice is still ringing out, loud and clear and powerful. And that voice says, mothers never stop protecting their children, not even death can break that bond, and love will always, always find a way. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about justice or love, or the bonds between mothers and their children, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear this message. Someone is fighting their own battle against evil and manipulation and lies. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know that persistence pays off, that truth matters, that love wins. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for witnessing my daughter's triumph over the man who tried to erase her. And thank you for being part of the community that believes in justice, believes in truth, and believes that one voice, speaking from beyond the grave, can change everything. Sleep well tonight knowing that Eleanor Mae Hartfield and her daughter Jasmine are living proof that love transcends death, that mothers never give up, and that evil, no matter how clever, will eventually face the consequences of its actions. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my daughter's legacy. And I'm sharing it with you so that her voice continues to echo, continues to inspire, continues to remind us all that we must never stop fighting for the ones we love. Never stop. Never give up. Never let them win.